Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I am Stephen Drew from the Architecture Social, and I am joined here by Ruchi Sabale. Did I get that right, Ruchi?
Yes, Stephen. You did indeed.
Yes. Okay, fantastic. Ruchi, it's a pleasure to have you here, and what a joy. It's a bit of a strange time, but hey, Donald Trump is not here. This is free. This is free territory. We might have the vaccine coming out and all this stuff, which is great. And it's just nice to take a breather and also chat a little bit about architecture. But one of the reasons, of course, it was good to speak to you. I think, though, looking at your career today and having discussed it and having explored it with you is absolutely fascinating. So it's a pleasure for you to join us. How are you, first of all? Are you okay?
Stephen, thank you so very much. First of all, it's an honor to be a part of this fantastic platform, Architectural Social. I love it. I absolutely love it. And, having gone through what you have been doing in the past few months, I think it's a fantastic platform for young people to come together and sort of share and have conversations. So thank you for having me. Thank you.
No worries, of course. And so for anyone that hasn't met you so far, I can see here on your career as well, you've been a project architect in India. You've then been an urban design consultant. You've been a senior designer. You've done a bit of interior designer. You are like super lady right now. And then, and so you're an associate as well as that. And one of the reasons why I thought it'd be good to talk today is because you are a project manager in an architectural practice, which is quite an impressive feat and not a role that is typically done. So, wow, first of all, how have you done so much stuff? What's your secret? Is there a secret in there?
You know what? I have always sort of been super enthusiastic and super eager to sort of just try new things. I mean, that's just been, in my nature. So perhaps that's just given me opportunities as well, because, many times you do go looking for opportunities, but sometimes they just come to you. So I've just been really fortunate and perhaps lucky enough, to be able to try my hand, a little bit at everything just to get an idea. So, I sort of perhaps just like to take a little step back and, talk you through a little bit sort of interesting part of my journey, which actually started, soon after I finished or, when I did architecture. Because I think that's what was the changing point or, the pivotal point that I started thinking a little bit differently. I think all architects do. I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah.
But I think what I got an opportunity was that in I think it was part 2 experience that I had this fantastic opportunity to work with architect B.V. Doshi. He is one of the Pritzker Award winners. He's the only Indian architect to have gotten this award for so many years. And at that point in time, it was absolutely pivotal for me to be able to sit with him, to have conversations with him, because your mind and your, you are so hungry to learn things, and your mind is really tender, trying to understand different sides of architecture and design. So he was really, sort of a main sort of contributor to what I did later in life. And after completing architecture, obviously, I ended up doing my master's in urban planning from the School of Planning and Architecture. And I think then my quest of, just sort of meeting people, talking to them sort of just came very naturally to me. And again, opportunities came through, and I just literally took any opportunity head on, without, sometimes you overthink, and I do overthink a lot. I am a victim of that. But I think at that point in time, I just went with the flow. And when I did that, I think I learned a lot.
It's amazing. And so you basically, and I can see here, so your LinkedIn profile is like a quest, it's like a journey. I love it. It's literally like, and because it's important, you've actually practiced architecture in many different places as well, haven't you? So you studied So at first you studied in the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi,
Yes.
and Masters of Urban Planning, City, Urban, Community and Regional Planning. So that's quite interesting in itself. So you were initially interested in urban design and kind of large scale architecture. Is that the case?
Yes, I was. And I think, again, coming back to Doshi, when I worked with the Vastushil Foundation, which was his firm where I worked, when we used to have these very odd lunchtime conversations with him, he always used to say that, an architect is like a sthapati. Sthapati is like the Indian connotation or Sanskrit word for someone who's called as the master builder. Someone
Right.
who brings everything together. It was, a bit of, throw in a little bit of philosophy, throw in a little bit of, history and, all that sort of things together. So it was very interesting conversations. And the idea of someone who can bring things together sort of just stuck with me in my head.
Mm.
And then if you zoom out of architecture, you're into something that is called as urban design. If you zoom out of urban design, there's something which is called as urban planning. So I think I had this very natural inclination of looking at the bigger picture and, getting to know how things work. So, that's what was my drive after finishing architecture. I wanted to do, urban planning / urban design. So
amazing. And what's quite interesting is because we're talking about the large scale, but you've also... And so we're talking about some of the stuff that you did in India as well, which is amazing. But you came to the UK at some point around what? It seems around 2007. So you had a nice year or two before the crash to the market. But
Absolutely.
yeah. So you had a bit of a nice time, but then you joined Benoist. And what's interesting, because the work at Benoist is very different. And I can imagine a lot of it was retail as well.
Yes.
And that is completely the different end of the scale, isn't it? Compared to what we're talking.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
What did you do at Benoist? It'd be lovely to hear about some of the stuff and how different it was maybe, culturally and what you learned on that different scale. I would love to understand it.
And again, a very interesting story with Benoist, Stephen. It so happened that I was working in Mumbai with a retail firm again called as Prozone. And at that point in time, I was obviously, working as an urban design consultant. And I was very heavily involved in getting planning applications, in the Indian context, obviously, talking to people, talking to public and getting some projects approved. And I sort of, had the idea and the knowledge base of sort of maneuvering, through the statutory processes that were there in India. And there was a time around that time that my husband and I, we sort of, decided to move to the UK, just to explore, widen the canvas a bit and see what's in store. And this particular firm that I worked with, fortunately, had a joint venture with Capital Shopping Centers, which was, where Benoist and Capital Shopping Centers were partners in Blue Waters, right? I mean, that's how, they wanted to expand their retail and architecture expertise in Asia and in India. So I had literally handed over my resignation letter, but my director then in Prozone was like, hey, where are you going, right? Well, why are you going? Where are you going? So when I did say that I was moving to London, he said, well, hang on a minute. I think this would be an awesome opportunity for you because I feel that, you're the right person to work cohesively with Benoist, being a part of Benoist, and telling them because they had already were going to do the concept design and the schematic design for one of the projects that I had worked on.
Right.
So anyway, I got telephonically interviewed just before Christmas by Graham Cartledge, who was then the chairman of Benoist. It was a fab experience. It was fantastic talking to him. Then eventually I did have a series of formal interviews. And they felt perhaps I was the right fit. And they really appreciated the fact that I brought in a lot of cultural, regional understanding of the place. That's what was required for the level of design that they were putting into, because you literally, design concept, you can't just take a Western, ideologies and sort of just stick it in Asia or in any different cultural setup. So I think it was a fantastic opportunity for me. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. So even before I landed to the UK, I had a job in hand, which was really fortunate. And I consider myself really, really fortunate to have that. So yes, I did work on India projects after that. And then the crash was about to happen, but slowly what happened was that the Indian project started, they finished the schematic design, and, they were sort of, there was a calm time after that. And then the Middle East was growing during that time, as we all know. And then there was only the money flowing from the Middle East. So I worked on projects, which was Yas Island and the Ferrari World, which I think was a fabulous experience for me.
Oh, wow.
And, as I said to you, I have just been very appreciative of the fact that, you have an opportunity to learn something more. So as you had rightly said before that, I've sort of done the large scale as well as, the interiors. When I was put into, when I was a part of this urban planning scale level project, suddenly there was a component when the project progressed and they wanted someone to really take care of the interior sides, of someone who could perhaps churn out some small packages and interior packages. And there I was, I just put my hand up, ready to do it. I sort of had, done it in India to a level, but, I wanted to explore and just challenge myself to understand everything about, the design nitty-gritties and, the building regulations, etc.
Yeah.
So the culture in Benoist was, the people there were absolutely fantastic. And I think that's what I think makes the workplace, a go-to place if the people around are, really sort of helpful in so many ways. And it was a multicultural environment, it was very, it was a fantastic exchange of design ideologies, or even aspects like statutory rules and regulations, which you could just literally pick up the phone to our colleagues back in Asia and then just learn from them. So it was great.
So they're a really good company, and I guess what it's interesting to talk about that period is because I was at part one in 2008. Going into 2009, right. and I remember I joined EPR Architects, and they were a great company, but it was a tough time. There was redundancies there, and that's why anyone during this period right now with coronavirus, there's definitely similar strains. So that's why I always try to remind people that you can survive it, you can get through it. It's not going to be easy, but I imagine it was tough for a while at Benoist. You're saying it's a good culture as well, but like everyone during the pandemic, you have to work extra hard, kind of survive it. It's not for the faint of heart. So what was it like at Benoist at the time? Was it all just muscling down, powering through on the projects you were doing and just keeping afloat?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it was challenging. 2009 was extremely challenging. But again, I think I was just fortunate enough to be in a team and to be in a project that had a lot of revenue coming in, and they had a lot of, the projects were still ticking. And although we had reduced in size in terms of the team, there were, we were thin, completely thin, like right from, 60 odd people working on a project, we were literally 50%. And we literally had to do, work extra hours, literally burn the candle at both the ends kind of a situation, right? But somehow we survived, and I sort of, managed to be employed and not being made redundant during that time. So I was just lucky enough, really to just continue.
You did really well, and so you survived that. We all had a few bruises during that era, and so in total, you were just to kind of because I to visualize it for people, you were at Benoist for close to 9 years. So
yes,
that clearly says the kind of company culture they were, but also is a testament to yourself. So you were at Benoist for 9 years, and then another opportunity presented itself. So you moved to Callison RTKL, right?
Yeah.
And this is where we're getting a bit interesting, because I'd love to hear about you joining Callison RTKL, but why I thought this would be a great subject is that I always get asked about project management in architecture.
Yeah.
And you kind of fell into this role, right? So we've done urban design, we've done interior design, you've done everything, and now you join somewhere else, and you effectively go into the role of project management. How did that come about then?
Right. So while I was with Benoy, and again, I think the credit also goes to the directors who were there then, who were absolutely amazing in terms of mentorship. And while I had sort of spent a lot of time working on different sectors, from hospitality to retail, to residential in Benoy, there was a part of me that I just thought that I am not exploring my full potential, I wanted to do something more, like something that I could perhaps have a bit more, challenge myself, really, to be honest. And it's so easy, and you would agree, I think, that, in architecture, it is so easy to get sort of pigeonholed in doing something that you are doing for so many years, and you get into that level of comfort zone. And I think to break out of that comfort zone is a step in itself. And I think that happened to me a little before I actually joined Callison. And I had this very honest conversation with one of my, lady directors at that time. And since I had worked on a project in South Korea with her, and I had sort of managed, a few South Korean clients very well, she was really pleased with the way I had handled that situation. And she just came to me one day and she said, "You know what, Ruchi, I think you should just look out a little bit, I think you can do so much more." And I think that really gave me the confidence, of sort of just following my natural skill sets, something that came really naturally to me. And I was genuinely interested. Like, I used to really pester my directors, asking them very odd questions. The gray side of architecture is something that I really wanted to know. How do you get a project? How do you run it? Where does the money come from? And how do you manage the resources? Everything, all those sort of questions. And sometimes I did get good answers, but sometimes I didn't really get any answers. So I really wanted to find out, how do you seal a deal? Like, for me, that was really fascinating. And, when I was studying in India, obviously, some people do have this natural temperament of, they have the business acumen of sort of having a deal and, going out there and, selling yourself and, sealing a deal, basically. But there are some things that are actually not taught in architecture schools. We are fabulous. We are great in design. We know the basics. We know how things work. But how to actually get business is something that I really wanted to know. And I think that's what was my trigger after 8.5 years, and after having this push from my director and giving me the confidence, I just thought that, I really need to look into this. And I just, spent some time just literally introspecting what was I good at. I was obviously, I thought that, I'm great with people. I have great people skills. I can understand. I can get the bigger picture. And, my knowledge of urban planning, urban design, everything helped me in sort of analyzing this. And then something that was there in front of me was I wanted to manage. I wanted to be someone like a go-to person if a project had to be, started or completed. Like, I really liked that idea of being in control of situations. So, and project management that time at Callison RTKL was again like a role that was, I thought that was completely stitched for me because I think they offered this project management role, and they actually train you as a project manager internally within Callison RTKL. And for me, again, like, I've just been fortunate. I just feel that, people who you meet in your journey of your career or even your professional and personal life have a lot of role to play in how you sort of progress through. And my mentor there, Steven Greenberg, really was someone who really told me the intricacies, the boring side of architecture. If you want to put it that way. But it was so interesting for me. I loved the legal bit. I loved the financial bits. I loved the, the aspects of just simple bookkeeping. Like, I really wanted to know, how do you do it? How do you do it in real life? How do you manage a small 200 square meter project vis-a-vis, like 100,000 square meter project, So, And of course, client relationship is another story. So I really enjoyed my time there.
Amazing. I think that's fantastic. There's such a nice insight, and I'm loving your bundles of energy. I can see why you did really well in the role. And so, what would be really interesting is, now you've seen both sides, because I think some architects may like the idea of project management. Like, oh, I'd love to be a project manager, and it worked for you, right? And you love it, and you've done well in it. And maybe you can tell us a few antidotes, a few things you've learned. But at the same time, I would say it's not for everyone. And so what would you describe as the kind of personality that does well in project management? Or is there a few examples where maybe some people are suited to becoming an architect, and then maybe it's more about learning certain skills which they can apply as an architect? Because not everyone needs to become a project manager, right?
Correct. Absolutely. And you are absolutely true. And I mean, this is a real fact that everybody cannot be a project manager. Everybody doesn't have the temperament to become a project manager. And I think what I learned and what I analyzed about myself was that really project managers, need to be fundamentals. You obviously need to be people's person,
Right.
And project management, like in my dictionary, project management is more like priority management in my head. I think we all are born project managers in our personal lives and our professional lives as well. You are managing your life. You have life is a project, I feel, so you tend to do these little tasks in day to day, and then everybody is a project manager. But really in architecture, I think there is so much thrown at it. Is a mix. It is one of the most complex fields, I feel, in architecture when you talk about project management, because you need to be really jack of all trades and perhaps master of a few, but you do need to understand everything that comes together in actually doing a project. And I think most importantly, when you are working with people, and I think I have learned it through my own experience, is something that you really need to understand the strengths of people who you are working with. You need to understand who's a researcher, who's an expert, who's a planner, who's a creative, who's a communicator. And I think communication is a given in project management. You can never be tired of being a good communicator. You have to be a good communicator. Like it's something like you can't be a good project manager if you can't express your ideas and thoughts and communicate from A to B. So
it's amazing. Look, I find that's such a really great insight, and I always find that when speaking to someone, we can talk about client-side roles which involve project management, working for a developer, but as well as an architectural practice, being a project manager is quite a sought-out role. I think that's such a good explanation. And the other thing I always think about when speaking to these people is that what you have to remember is, and you tell me if you think this is a fair statement, when you're a project manager, you're about championing in the design for the best outcome. You're all about getting that project built on time, in budget, for the client's happy, and you're an architect, so you want the design tip top. But you're not, quote unquote, the designer anymore per se, is it? Your role has changed, and that's the bit that I always think is that you can't have everything, and that's when you're a project manager, you effectively step away from that lead design role, isn't it? And you can't do both. That's impossible.
No, that's impossible. And I think in a way that I think you have to have a level of contentment and acceptance that, okay, this is going to be my domain. I have limitations that are, you need to learn to be able to pass the baton or give the responsibility and have that level of trust with people that they perhaps would do it to their expertise and to their level best. And this is where I'm saying again, that you really need to identify in your team who's really what in your team, because there are doers, there are researchers. So I think that's what I really learned within Callison RTKL, that to understand people's strengths, I think that really helped me do my projects in a very effective way. Because and of course, once you know the expertise of different people and the strengths or your strengths as versus their strength, you learn to delegate And that's what is project management all about. A very cliche, but I've sort of grown up listening to this from my dad. It's like managing men / women. Managing men is management. So literally that. I mean, you tend to learn the art of delegation or the art of managing men or managing people. And as I said before, and what you mentioned as well, it doesn't come naturally to everybody. So yeah, absolutely. That's why everybody can't be a project manager.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I'm not a project manager per se, but what I do is I do run the recruitment team in an architecture and McDonald company. And you're right, there's a point when the team goes to a certain size that you have to, as you say, trust people. You have to understand people's strengths and weaknesses, and and there's an art form to making that work. But then there's the other side of project management as well, where you represent obviously the architectural practice that you're working on, and you're working with the client, and then there's that. As you say, you've got to do the communication back and forth, but there's almost that bit that you have to represent your team. And what I always find funny is that while everything and the end result can be professional and you've got it all there, like, what it's like behind the scenes as a project management. You could be right up to the line trying to organize things, and it's human beings. So a lot of the times things go wrong, right? Or part of your role would be like, you wake up and you'll be like, we haven't got this because something's happened. So it's not for the faint heart in that way, because, sometimes you got to be like, I've got my meeting at 3. I've got to go in. Yeah. I've got to make sure everything's ready. Yeah. And things go wrong, don't they? A lot of the time.
Yes, absolutely. And exactly, Stephen. So this brings me to something else that I have learned in this process is, you have to be able to understand the fact that there has to be a contingency plan. Always. Right. Like in my head, when I make a plan, whether it's a resource plan or a financial plan or anything, in my head, I always think of the contingencies. I always think of a backup. Plan B has to be mentally ready, while you're actually crafting your plan A. Right. And things go wrong. It's a given, like every day. And again, that I want to stress this. Every day in a life of a project manager is different. Every day is different. So if you are someone who, doesn't like the same old routine, then yes, project management may work for you, because, it's every day I've been to the office, and it's sometimes it goes as planned, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting. And so as well, and dispel this myth for me, because I now learn that project management, a lot of it is communications, a lot of it's going to meetings. But my terribly inaccurate picture in my head at first was that a project manager literally sits in front of Excel all day with Gantt charts, but that's not what it's like at all, is it? So that's a complete myth then. Yeah,
you could say that, although Gantt charts and Excel sheets do form a major part of our lives, but I do think that I think, again, being in an architectural firm and being a project manager in an architectural firm gives you that window or that leverage of just speaking into and just participating in some fantastic design charrettes that you always thought that you missed while being a project manager. So I think it's a balance, and I think the most fun part of project management that I've really enjoyed is connecting with people. I think that's what is something that I've really enjoyed, and I've obviously honed on that skill sets of understanding people and knowing the background and just understanding how the financials work and how things really work. So yeah, it's ended up me having conversations with our legal counsel hours together, but I think that is just out of my own interest. I don't expect anybody or everybody to have that level of interest, but it's a little bit of everything, I think.
It's funny because I think with recruitment, there's always there's an element of project management, because each recruitment process is basically a project. And then what I've learned is that in theory, it should be so simple, right? Yeah. You just you speak to someone, you get them a job, but it's totally not like that, because it's the human interactions and the quirkisms of real life, of stuff popping up, of crazy things happening, and people timelines, and so so recruitment gets quite complicated when in fact it should be really simple. And that's why I giggle a little bit, because the idea of someone, basically, if you think project management is literally sitting in front of that Excel chart, the point is that your brain's going to go in overload day two because you're not following the Gantt chart because something happens, isn't it? It's a problem on site, or someone's unwell, they can't turn up, it puts things back, and and there's all these different stuff that comes up. So I tell you what, right? I actually had someone reach out to me, a lecturer from the University of Portsmouth, actually, talk to me about project management and what we would say to students. Now, I'm quite confident in terms of talking to students about how to go about architecture, part one, part two, or the new apprentice scheme, which is awesome. I really always recommend that. But what would your advice be to anyone that kind of has an interest in project management and maybe they're not too sure how to go about it? Is there a few places you would look at first, or do you speak with the practice, or what would your advice be to anyone interested in that kind of career trajectory?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways that you could possibly go. But the most important thing is that I think the person should be able to, be open to work in an environment where there is a heterogeneous mix of either work or people, because that's what's going to give him or her, a platform to explore your own capacities and capabilities, to work. Because ultimately, I think working together is something that is a part of a soft skill. Right? I mean, it's a mix of, you can always apply what you have learned in your, whatever you have learned over the 5 years or 7 years. But I think to apply them in real life is a totally different aspect. But there are certain companies who do offer, this part of the role where you are a part of a bigger project management team. And, you are essentially working under the lead project manager, but you are helping him or her in the day-to-day, aspects where you get like a flavor of, what is involved in running a project. And I would obviously encourage, there are on particularly on social media and just generally on, YouTube or so many other aspects. So, where you could listen to different podcasts or, connect with people so easily these days, over Instagram. Or I would sort of, encourage them not to shy away. Reach out to them. If you know that if you know a mentor, if you know someone who could be your mentor, just feel free to reach out to them, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Oh my God, I have asked so many questions, and I always do. But I always have questions in my mind, right? But I think you should ask questions. So just feel free to reach out to people who you think or who you think could guide you, and don't be shy. Absolutely.
I think that's really good advice. And the other thing I like is that over time, I mean, you organically arrived to project management, but it was through you studying urban design and doing architecture and then traveling and then being involved in doing various aspects of project management in an architecture, in the role of an architect, and realizing, oh, do you know what? I like this, that you kind of found where you're at now. And that's the other thing that I would encourage anyone listening to. I mean, I studied architecture and then I moved into recruitment. It's just kind of how life goes. And it was because I like yourself, I really enjoyed the crits. I really enjoyed speaking to people. And I was the cheeky chap in the architecture office, which was not the best at getting details out. But I was good at speaking to everyone.
Yeah.
And you kind of, but the thing is, if I didn't study architecture, then I wouldn't lead an architectural recruitment team because I know the industry and I care about it is why I do what I do now. And so what I'm saying is it's like the stepping path. And maybe, I mean, the point is that the project management role came up through you and your career. And maybe if there's anyone listening, you don't necessarily need to be a project manager per se, or I always say, try being an architect first, or, some people, it's like, oh, should I do, I didn't do my part free, but I worked in industry for years to kind of feel out what I liked and what I didn't like about it. And that kind of informed my perception of what I wanted to do with my career. And I always think if you study architecture, you should at least go into architectural practice for a few years, and then you can use that experience to become a project manager, or go into, smaller scale interior design, or go big scale urban design, or, you might go, forget this, I'm opening up a cake shop. But if you,
absolutely. No,
why
and
not?
You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Stephen. And when you mentioned about, we as architects, I think the moment you are into an architecture field, right, you tend to have an element of creative thinking. So I think whenever any issues arise in project management life, right, if there is an issue, I think the component of us being inherently architects and we coming out with creative solutions comes really naturally, I think. So you should just have that confidence in you that you would be able to find, a solution when, even if you're doing the Excel sheets and Gantt charts, right?
I agree with you. Do you know what? You learn so many skills studying architecture, presenting. I mean, the whole, getting a 2-1 in architecture or whatever grade you get, it's really tough. So I think there's so much skills there. And what I like, what you quite highlighted as well, is because I think architecture is so broad and you learn so much. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are quote unquote a good businessman. Nor does it mean you have to be. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a handy skill. If you're running your own architectural practice, I mean, I've run a few businesses and I've learned the hard way of doing it wrong half the time. And that's a good life lesson. But it's like what you said before of when you were asking questions about how do you win work? How do you do all this stuff? Because architecture is so broad. I mean, it's one art form to be like a really good front end designer, a really good delivery architect, but then running an architectural business or project management as a skill, that is kind of like a whole separate thing again. It's there's so much. So you kind of have to, I think the more you do architecture for a while, then you can kind of hone in on what you want to do. I mean, what do you think? Is that a fair?
That is, Stephen. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I always draw this parallel, in my family, everybody is into medicine. And it's like, when you are out of a medical school and we are out of architecture, there are so many specializations that are there at your disposal that you could possibly, you could become an oncologist or a radiologist or an ophthalmologist and, or just become a GP, general practitioner who knows perhaps a little bit of everything, right? So it's really, a whole spectrum, and that's what architecture actually gives you. It gives you the opportunity to go from, an interior design and focusing for product design, interior design, urban design, actual hardcore architecture, urban planning. Like there are endless possibilities these days, and particularly, I mean, I happen to meet someone very interesting who actually did architecture, but then just went into some, media and communication. Like she just thought that, she was a bit more of, a media person. But architecture actually helped her to know her skill sets in that sense. So you just have to, do a little bit of introspection sometime, take a little bit of me time, and thank God to, to see the good part or the good side of this lockdown is it has given people time to reflect.
Yeah.
And I think the positive way of using this time is really, just really understanding, what are my skill sets? What am I good at? Do you want to hone those and, just encash opportunities with those? And I think if you do that, the work doesn't really become like work, like a chore. You don't have to do an extra effort. So, yeah.
I think that's great. And well, that's how we started talking last week, isn't it? Because of my podcast, which was kind of like with me banging my barrel on the hall and saying people should use this time in lockdown to do try and be constructive. Yeah, because I mean we're all guilty of it, and I just think that it's better to do something or learn from it than to look back and it to be a waste of time, because we can't go back. And hopefully, if this vaccine ever does come out, which it sounds hopeful, but the point is there is light at the end of the tunnel. And what kind of person do you want to be at the end of the year to be like, oh, that was tough, I didn't really do much, or do you want to do something? I mean, That's why I say, but no one's perfect, and we all learn along the way. And so, I mean, that's been really useful. What I would like to do would be interesting to know though as well. I mean, can you give me a flavor for anyone to visualize the kind of projects that you project manage, or I mean, what's been the biggest, craziest, or most complicated building that you've overcome and delivered? Have you worked on any big ones you're allowed to talk about, or complicated projects?
I may not be able to talk about the ones that I would want to talk about, but there are, this is a recent one, and I think I've used it again. I've used this project for my academics. I by the way, I recently just finished, my part 3. I wanted to do it. It was in my bucket list, so I've used this for that. But having said that, I mean, it's a very this project. It was a spinning studio, and it was a very small project, but you cannot even you would think that a smaller project will be less complex, and it wouldn't have as many issues as as a bigger project, but that's not the case, unfortunately. You never know what is happening or what would happen tomorrow. Even if you have planned and, worked it out to the T, you don't know what would happen or what would go wrong. And that's everything that could go wrong, perhaps went wrong. But in the end, I think what my biggest learning was, communication was something that I learned for this project, because I literally project managed this, and I was involved in this project from our IBA stage 0 to, stage 7, stage 6. And there was an element of, and we are all guilty of it. Architects are all guilty of this. Whenever there is something happening where, you are asked to do an extra bit of work, we don't ask for additional service, or we don't ask for money, or, we don't ask for, we in a way, in my head, and this is completely my take on this, I think we really devalue what we bring to the table. And that is something I really learned, that if we as professionals, devalue, then how would you expect our architecture profession to be paid better, for us to have good profits, et cetera, et cetera. I know it's another podcast if you want to talk about it. But coming to the reality, the two issues were literally this: communication, which had to be, and not between perhaps myself and the client, or, the firm and the client. It was more so between, the contractors and the subcontractors, and, the whole chain when the project actually started on site. But yes, I think I'm not, for the next project I would perhaps go to, I am not going to shy away again to ask questions, to know the processes, to know what are the gaps. And I think it's very important to be able to do that, because only when you know the answers to these questions, then at least you know what contingency plan you're going to have if things go wrong, right?
Yeah.
So that's the learning I've had from, to tell you in a nutshell.
It's amazing. And I love that as well. It doesn't matter the size of the project. Problems still can pop up. So in this case, size doesn't matter, gentlemen.
It doesn't. Absolutely.
Size doesn't matter. Then problems are going to creep up. You're like, hang on, this project was small. I thought this would be easy. No. My spinning class with people in. You're like, you guys are spinning crazy. No. That's amazing. All right, fantastic. And look, I think that's really insightful. And to me, it's been really interesting. So what I was going to say now is, so you're on the Architecture Social, and I love your energy. Maybe we can get some ideas and some stuff going. But if anyone wants to ask any questions about project management, they can find you on the Architecture Social. You're also on LinkedIn as well. Yeah. So someone can add you there. So it's Ruchi Sabale. Did I get that right?
That's absolutely right.
Do you know what I'm doing in my head? You know, when you think about the wrong way, and then I'm like, which way is it? I'm kind of being like, oh, it's definitely not that one. All right, okay.
Not that way, yes.
People can add you there as well. That's really great. I mean, I'm really excited to maybe if one day you can reveal the confidential projects, and maybe what we can do at some point is maybe down the line there could be a show and tell with a literal example where you project managed and overcome stuff. Yeah, because I think this is like a really nice intro, and then the next one we can have like the spinning class returns, and it's
absolutely
all the problems.
You know what, Stephen? There's one definition. You know, have you been ever asked why do you feel proud of being an architect, or what do you like about architecture? Like I've got this question so many times, and very recently though, okay, I'd like to read it out to you because I specifically wanted to mention this. And this particular definition goes like this, okay? So the question obviously is, why do you feel proud of being an architect? So I read this somewhere, I'm just quoting. I smiled and said, a lawyer's income increases with increase in crime and litigation. A doctor's income increases with the increase in diseases, illness, and now the pandemic. But an architect's income increases with prosperity of people and the nation. Now that, when I read this, right, literally brought a smile on my face. It may be way too philosophical in many ways, but this is something that I was perhaps not able to pin it down in words or say it in words. And I think this is really it. Why do I feel so glad that I'm in architecture, or why I did architecture, even if it is not, what it should be in terms of, if you want to compare yourself to a lawyer's income or, a doctor's income, for example, what keeps us going, right? There's always an element of surprise in our lives. But I thought this definition of an architect was quite interesting, right? What do you think of that?
I think so. Yeah, I agree. And look, I think that architecture, the career, there is something so valuable. It reminds me of an associate at EPR who I was basically working for. And when I was a part one, and he had the same thing where he's saying, like, I've got a friend who's a lawyer who earns over 100 grand, and he's so jealous of me. And I remember thinking as a kid, like, why is he jealous? He's rich, But what it was is you said, I went, why? And, the associate said at the time, he's like, well, I get to draw all day and make a difference, whereas the lawyer doesn't. It's literally about money in his friend's perception. Of course, you can get some solicitors that do great jobs. But the point is that architecture, and look, I'll tell you right now in recruitment, there's always the 1% where you can make a lot of money like everywhere else. But for the most part, if you think in architecture, it has to be about something that transcends money. And it's like yourself doing that project management, delivering the building, getting the people spinning in the spinning classes. That's all. But that's what makes it worth it, because that transcends being quote unquote. I like to use the analogy of, an accountant. I have a friend who's an accountant, and he was like, it's a nightmare. Or being a recruitment consultant like me, build a building, make something different. But I agree, and that's what I say. So, I mean, look, if that's your passion, then the architecture is always rewarding. You're going to get a few people saying it's not paid enough, and over time, hopefully that'll change. I do think it's what you're saying, though, of like, it's about retaining that value with the client. And I think what's good is the conversations, and I've had a few podcasts, and I think it's prominent in what people are saying. And I like what you say, Ruchi, about a bit of extra work. It should be extra time. I mean, when I ran a business before, we had accountants. Everything you do is extra. And we had a solicitor as well, because you got to set up all the recruitment, law, legal stuff. And let me tell you, when you ring up a solicitor, they have a little button there.
Of course they do.
They're like,
don't they?
Stephen Drew's ringing. Let's turn it on. Half an hour conversation, £100. You're like, what? But that's industry standard. And I think that the point is, you can do it in a way which is not, because I think people almost feel a bit embarrassed to ask for money sometimes, and that shouldn't be the case. But what you're on about is, look, there's a bit of extra work. We can do a really good job. I need to keep the team morale high. You get a higher output, and to do this properly, so you haven't got a bodge job, £1,000 worth of time. If maybe you can phrase it more elegantly than that, but that's the point, isn't it? And I think the sooner we do that as an industry, I think everything will go up, because my current theory that I've had for a while is that when the fees are low, it's the beginning of, it's not dramatic, the beginning of the end, but basically all the problems come for it, because when it's lower money, you as a project manager get lower resources on it. You get, the time constraints, so there's less room to move, or, if the fees are low, basically if something doesn't go through the planning, I remember working at one building that didn't go through the planning, and we had to do all these resubmissions, and there was no money left to do it. And what happened is that the team was less, the morale was lower, and
exactly.
and so unfortunately, a lot of this can, if the fees are right at the start, it can be the difference between an enjoyable spinning experience, or
Absolutely.
or just literally spinning plates, to further the analogy. So, all right, I've enjoyed that now. So I'm going to say, well done on being a project manager and doing everything in architecture. So, Ruchi, you have from urban design to interior design, architecture, now project management. I can't wait to see what you get up to next. I can't wait to see some projects, and maybe we'll do a Zoom show and tell. And again, just for anyone who wants to add you, you are on LinkedIn, you are on the Architecture Social, and you're open to all questions from a junior to an architect, and making connections.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Stephen. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I think I hope your listeners or our listeners sort of get something out of this conversation. And whoever wants to get into project management, I think it's just a matter of just looking at your skill sets and what you're good at, and just make it like a second nature and go for it, right?
I agree. Fantastic. Next time we definitely need to get some video as well, because people can't see the man, the picture of the man and the cup of tea in the background. That's going to be a pleasure I've had. This is like serious Van Gogh picture in the background.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
Oh, I could talk all day. Thank you so much, Ruchi.
That
is my job as well, isn't it? Bye, Ruchi. Take care.